Radio Free Campus, brought to you by the American Council of Trustees and Alumni.
Welcome to Radio Free Campus. I'm Steve McGuire.
And I'm Justin Garrison, and in this episode, we have a true special treat for our audience today. Recently, Conan O'Brien sat down with Mick Jagger and had a pretty good chinwag, and we are doing the equivalent in the world of political theory today. We're very honored that Steve had an opportunity earlier, prior to this recording, to sit down and have a really impressive and lengthy conversation with an illustrious political theorist from Harvard University named Harvey Mansfield. So, Steve, could you introduce our guest for the few people listening who haven't heard of him and give us a little bit of a sense of what to expect?
Yeah, thanks. I was really delighted to have the chance to talk to Dr. Mansfield. I've followed his work for quite some time. Never really met him in person. I think I've seen him talk in person once, but definitely enjoy reading his work and following some of the events that he's held at Harvard, which always get thrown up on YouTube and that sort of thing. So he's recently retired from Harvard. He went there actually as a student in 1949 for the first time, and he spent basically most of the rest of his adult life at Harvard. He began teaching there in 1962, and then retired, as I said, recently in 2023. He's well known as a translator of Tocqueville and Machiavelli. He's written a number of books over the years, and he's won a number of awards. Just list a few of those. In 2004, he was awarded the National Humanities Medal. I believe that was awarded to him under George W. Bush. In 2007, he delivered the Thomas Jefferson Lecture, sponsored by the National Endowment of the Humanities. Have to mention that in 2006, ACTA gave him the Philip Merrill Award for outstanding contribution to liberal arts education. And another one in 2011, he received the Bradley Prize for outstanding achievement. So quite a remarkable career, a remarkable thinker who always has interesting things to say in the field of political theory. And he's recently published two more books. The first one is called The Rise and Fall of Rational Control, The History of Modern Political Philosophy. And that's based on lectures that he's given at Harvard every other year, basically since he started teaching there, and it covers thinkers from Machiavelli to Nietzsche. And then the book that we discuss most in the interview is called Where Harvard Went Wrong, 50 Years of Commentary That Fell on Deaf Ears. And he says in the book he's doing almost a victory lap, because two of the issues that he's been sort of critiquing at Harvard for a good chunk of his career, going back, into the 70s at least, are affirmative action and grade inflation. And of course, the year he retired, 2023, the Supreme Court came out with its SFFA decision, basically putting an end to affirmative action in academic admissions in higher ed. And now the Harvard faculty is also trying to do something about grade inflation and capping the number of A's that they're allowed to give out. So, he's been telling them they should do something about both of these things for about 50 years, I think. And finally they're doing something just as he retires. But the book's pretty remarkable. It's mostly a collection of things that he either wrote or said in the past. For instance, a series of op-eds from the Harvard Crimson, the student paper there. It also has notes or accounts of comments that he made in faculty meetings over the years. And those are pretty amazing to read through. He's always very tactful and in good cheer, but making these just devastating points, in my view, to what the faculty are trying to do. And a lot of the time in them, it even has in brackets that the faculty laughed at his jokes, even as he's making these arguments that nobody else agrees with. And once in a while, it's he sort of brings the knives out a bit. For instance, when they first created their concentration in women's studies in the mid-1980s, and he basically says he's never seen a more shameful proposal come before the faculty, and talks about how biased this program is. And it starts out with a course in feminist thought, and he points out, the next course is not classics in non-feminist thought, it's classics in feminist thought too. Right. And he says there's no classics being covered in this. It's very clearly driven by one perspective, some woman claiming to speak for all women. That sort of thing. It's a very strong critique that he made. Again, this was, 40 years ago or so. And then there's various other, op-eds, essays, speeches that he's given over the years where he addresses some of the things at Harvard. And, it was really great to get a chance to talk to him about all of that. We go for, I think, over an hour and has a lot to say. So I'll kind of leave it at that and, let viewers and listeners hear the interview for themselves.
Well, that's pretty exciting. I'm looking forward to this. So why don't we go ahead and cut to the interview?
Welcome to the podcast.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Very grateful that you could take the time to join us today. So I want to talk about some of the specific issues that you discuss in the book, including most prominently affirmative action and grade inflation. You discuss other things as well, Harvard's treatment of the ROTC program, questions about divestment from South Africa over the issue of apartheid, the rise of women's studies, and a few others. But affirmative action and grade inflation, I think, are the two, most well-known issues that you've addressed for many years during your time at Harvard. But I think you would say that the underlying issue here is the politicization or the increasing partisanship of the university. And so I wanted to start by asking you if you could just tell us a little bit about how the political or partisan character of Harvard has changed since you first arrived as a student back in the late 40s.
I first arrived, as you said, in 1949. At that time, the Harvard undergraduate college was, I think, mostly Republican. Most of the students were Republican, but that was changing already as I went through my 4 years. And by 1953, most of them were supporting Adlai Stevenson for president rather than Eisenhower. So that was something of a change. And it continued as the old Harvard sort of professoriate that dated from before World War II passed along to new, younger people who'd been in the war or close to it and were liberals. At the same time, a lot of them were Jews. It was as Harvard was abandoning its quota on Jewish faculty anyway, and so the Jews in a way took over, and they had a particular kind of liberal character, which actually my father was a professor at Ohio State, and he was very much a New Deal liberal, and that was the case also with most of the Harvard faculty, especially the younger, more active ones. But they had one quality, however. They weren't interested in or in any way attracted to communism. And they were therefore what were called later disparagingly Cold War liberals. And they pretty much ran the university until the late 60s, when the student rebellion took place over the America's role in the war in Vietnam. And those rebels were, if not communist, close to it. A goodly number of them wanted the North Vietnamese to win the war against America. So, and that was the famous New Left that spent most of its time attacking not conservatives, but liberals. The liberals weren't liberal enough. And so those people passed through college and later came back as what were called tenured radicals. And then they came back and got PhDs and faculty appointments. And the nature of the faculty became much more leftward than before. And that was that continued to the point where recently the conservatives were sort of pushed out, not brought in. We had, in the government department where I worked, we had a number of sort of well-known conservative professors over the time that I was there. Henry Kissinger, Zbigniew Brzezinski, James Q. Wilson, Edward Banfield, Patrick Moynihan, Samuel Huntington, sort of Adam Ulam. All these were, if not voting Republicans, very much academic conservatives, but they were never replaced, and they passed through and left with no successors. And then more recently, the left, which was sort of left in charge of Harvard, has become much more leftward. If you can go from the Jews to the Palestinians, to the point where Harvard now has more Palestinians than it has conservatives, and the Jews are looking at themselves as fading in importance. Only 7% of the undergraduates, that was very low compared to what we've had. So that's where we stood when Hamas made its attack in 2023. And immediately after that, the day after Hamas attacked, Harvard student groups, pro-Palestinian student groups, made public announcements trying to get Harvard on their side and saying that anything that had happened was the fault of Israel. And so Harvard had to respond to that, which it did very inadequately. A new president, Claudine Gay, tried to calm people down, and she was invited to Washington, where a Harvard graduate, Elise Stefanik, questioned her, a formidable questioner as she turned out to be, and left her in confusion and unable to say anything more than that every such question can be resolved by pointing to the context. She would act according to the context. It didn't seem to be adequate, and it led, after some other events, to her resignation, so that and replacement by Alan Garber, who is a Jew and also a liberal, and a man who seems to have a much wiser view of the present situation. So we're perhaps on the uptick now from a long fall, gradual fall, not too except for the late 60s, it was sudden, toward the left, towards politicization of the university. So that those student groups supporting Hamas, they wanted to use Harvard. They wanted to use it. It wasn't that they were devoted to it or thought that Harvard should think this way. They were simply using it. And that I think that's a fundamental attitude of politicization. It's not just that you have politics. Of course you have opinions, but that you want the university, which is supposed to be above you, above ordinary politics, to support you.
Yeah, that's an interesting point that you make at the end about them wanting to use the university for their political purposes. I follow, those developments at Harvard and elsewhere quite closely. And, it's evident that Students for Justice in Palestine and other groups, they have a political cause and they want to use American universities and even other institutions to serve that political cause. Do you think that the students doing that at Harvard, in part thought that they could do that because the Harvard faculty have also over the years treated Harvard as an institution that they could use for their political purposes?
Yes, that was happening too. That was what was, especially after the late 60s. So a number of issues arose, ROTC and apartheid in South Africa. This was the leftward part of the faculty. That is, liberals are in control of Harvard, but the majority of liberals are sort of ordinary liberals, you might say, and there's a minority that are really on the left. The politicization that one speaks of is a very leftward politics. It's not just any politics. So what happens is that the more active ones rule the roost by just by being active and making claims and making demands, and the liberal majority tends to go along or to moderate those demands, but not to oppose them. And certainly the gradual disappearance of conservatives added to that fact. Yes, so the faculty was setting a bad example of politicization, and in general, the courses that were given, especially after the late 60s, were more partisan in their nature. It used to be, when I was an undergraduate, that it was usually pretty difficult to guess the politics of the professor. They made it hard to guess. And as time went on, the faculty made it easy to guess. And there was a kind of general attitude of, hugging themselves and complacent partisanship for one side.
At ACTA, one of the principles that we support is known as institutional neutrality. It's most closely associated with, I think, the University of Chicago's Cal report, which was also written during the time of the Vietnam War. So I wonder what you make of institutional neutrality. I know in your book, you argue for, I think, having both sides of the American political system represented rather than advocating for neutrality per se. But I think part of what institutional neutrality is trying to accomplish is the idea that a university should be a place where people come to debate ideas, and that the institution itself should not necessarily put its thumb on the scale, at least not too often, and certainly not when it comes to matters that do not directly affect, the governance of the institution itself. So I wonder, looking at, say, the debate over ROTC or apartheid in South Africa, do you see, does that resonate with you, this idea of institutional neutrality?
Yes, of course it does. And it would be nice if it worked to produce more conservatives. The trouble is that the universities already regard themselves as nonpartisan and neutral in their attitudes, and that if you ask them to support more professors or bring in more students that are neutral, they would choose the kind of people they've already got, because they already think they're neutral. So it is a difficulty for conservatives and for organizations like yours, or for, say, the new university at Austin has this problem. So do you want to blame politicization, which means blaming partisanship, or which means looking for a nonpartisan way of presenting your arguments and your thinking, or is it necessary to be more explicit in favor of conservatives? So, for example, at this new university, should it hire liberals? So it's a conservative university with a conservative president, and so far a pretty much conservative faculty. Should it hire liberals to fill out the political spectrum that you might want to show, or should it just take a conservative stand? In the website for the University of Austin, they attack Harvard. If you don't want to go to Harvard, come with us. And they do seem to get conservative students for that reason, and the place has that kind of smell and tone to it. So do you want in higher education generally to have more conservatives in conservative places? Or do you just want to have a few conservatives spread out among a lot of universities dominated by the left? And it does seem we're sort of doing both. And maybe that's the correct solution. I think that I made the argument that bipartisan is better than nonpartisan, and that nonpartisan will usually be abused to favor liberals or right-thinking liberals. So, and it won't be used to get conservatives, especially now that there are just so very few anywhere. What is needed immediately in most American universities, including the most prestigious ones, is the rapid hiring of at least a few conservatives, and whether calling for neutrality will bring that about, one doesn't know. On the other hand, neutrality is much more agreeable to the present liberal faculty. They, as I said, generally think themselves to be pretty neutral, and they don't like affirmative action for conservatives. Mm-hmm. They say, "Oh, well, you're just doing what you say you don't like in others by asking for conservatives to be hired."
So perhaps some kind of institutional neutrality on its own is not enough. It would have to be complemented by another phrase that people use today, viewpoint diversity. Yeah. And as you say, you advocate for bringing more conservatives into the university, and they may be able to offer reasons in return and push back on liberal and left-leaning colleagues to help maintain the balance at the university.
Yeah. But that's viewpoint diversity it needs to be a euphemism for conservatives. Okay. and it mustn't be abused by pointing to Palestinians. We need more of those, or communists, or ultra-right people. No, we need some sensible conservatives everywhere. And that's the way the term should come out, viewpoint diversity. Yeah. So yes, as long as it's correctly understood. See, now at Harvard, it seems that the president is calling for viewpoint diversity, mm-hmm. and with the understanding that means conservatives. But but then you're not really addressing the problem, which is lack of conservatives. And conservatives are not just people with different viewpoints. They're people with a particular reaction to liberalism. Or I could say a few words about that. That the political scientists who study parties tend to think of viewpoint or values as a set of beliefs. One party has one set, and the other has another set. I think that isn't really accurate. One party is that's a Democratic Party, has a certain set of beliefs that the other party opposes and argues against. So our partisanship or our partisan arguments are a form of argument in which the two sides address each other. If you're very interested in politics, say, or in Washington, D.C. or wherever, you wake up in the morning and look to see what those damn Republicans have said overnight, and that needs to be answered. This thrust and from one side to the other side is, I think, characteristic of it. And to make a long story short, I would say that the Democrats stand for what they call empathy or compassion, which means feeling sorry for people who are less well off than you are. Whereas Republicans stand for admiration of those who are different from other people and who are ambitious and who contribute more and are therefore not beneath you like those you feel sorry for, but above you because you admire them. They've done something that you wish you had done, that kind. So I think that it describes the general party argument today, and perhaps generally speaking in most free societies. So that means that when you don't have conservatives, you're missing the half of the argument that they stand for. And it isn't just that these are just odd beliefs or things that they say and that you could dismiss or don't need to consider. There was a recent article just published by John Shields, a professor at Claremont, on syllabi, the course syllabi that professors use over contentious issues. And it showed that professors tend to assign reading. The syllabus is where you assign readings for students in your course. And those syllabi tend to be intensely partisan, and that very few professors assign the other side, especially on contentious issues like race and crime or abortion, or I forgot, there was a third one too, but so that's kind of evidence that viewpoint diversity is important and lacking in university. They're actually missing something. It isn't just that they're being unjust or not nice to conservatives, but that what they say is inadequate and sort of just half of what needs to be brought to attention.
Yeah, I think another topic in that paper by Shields and others was Israel-Palestine, and they showed that.
Oh, yes, right, yeah.
The Israeli side or the pro-Israel side is not represented nearly as strongly.
That's right. Yeah.
So, in terms of the partisanship, if we go back to, say, Socrates and Plato, there is at least the suggestion that politics operates on the level of opinion, and one could become a philosopher, a lover of wisdom who ascends from opinion to knowledge or understanding. And it raises the question of whether human beings really can do that. Can one become someone who's above opinion or above than partisan politics and become a philosopher? And then if we look at the present day, on the one hand, as you've been talking about, you have faculty and students who are politicizing the university. But on the other hand, we also live in an age of science. And I think faculty are used to following arguments, as you say at various points in your book. And so I think there's something interesting going on there where on the one hand, they are political partisans. But on the other hand, maybe they think of themselves as advocates for pure science, almost like philosophers of a sort, or philosopher kings. And I wonder what you think of that. And I wonder if you think that makes it especially difficult in some ways for professors to engage in the art of politics, which often depends on compromising with people who you think are just dead wrong.
Very true, I think, what you say. You can also look at this in terms of the ivory tower, that the university has a kind of independence from the society it finds itself in. But it's an independence of a certain kind, because the ivory tower does have its base in a society and must take account of what its society is doing, whether it is at war and so on. So this was the case even in Socrates, that he had to take account of what was happening in Athens, and one of the most famous dialogue perhaps that there is in Plato's Apology of Socrates. This is the philosopher coming to terms with the society that accuses him of undermining them, because philosophy means questioning everything. And the same with science today, questioning everything. But society holds certain things, cherishes certain things as true, and maybe needs to cherish those things. It can't always have an open mind about everything that it believes. Say, if in a democracy, you have to believe that people are created equal, as we do. So that's not open in the usual sense of, or in the Socratic sense of thinking. So this is very much part of the daily life of a professor, is saying things that, or questioning things that people normally believe. So the way you see it, especially among the liberals, is the use of the word stereotype. They think that all the things that we believe, which means especially all the differences that we see between peoples, and that make us question the idea of equality, all those things are stereotypes which have just constructed and in no way natural or permanent. So that is the way they try to handle this problem. But it is a question. And as far as science goes, both left and right question whether science should be free to explore as it wishes wherever it wants to go. So the climate, climate thing is is a way of so showing that, or arguing that we need to be careful where we go so as to keep our planet habitable, like that. And conservatives worry about the enhancement of the human soul or the human body through cloning, things like that. Mm-hmm. So everybody has some question. The atomic scientists, should atomic weapons have been made? So everyone has these doubts, which go back to the original, civic questioning of the first philosophers, and especially Socrates. So in that way, universities have access to the best original thinking that we have, and they claim that nowadays not to be an ivory tower, but to be independent. That's very much what Harvard is trying to do, is trying to defend its independence against the Trump administration, and doing its best to do that at the same time. And this is what President Garber wants to do, accepting that reforms need to be made, including bringing conservatives back to Harvard. So it is it's a very difficult path to walk between being totally independent, and which means devoted to your science or to philosophy, and civic-minded, which means worrying about the contribution that you're making or the example that you're setting for your fellow citizens.
You've mentioned in some of your writing in the Wall Street Journal, I know, and elsewhere, that former President Claudine Gay, when she became president, she wanted Harvard to become a part of society, and you saw this as representing this politicization of the university coming down out of the ivory tower and wanting to influence society. Yeah. But then on the other hand, seemingly wanting to maintain independence. So, yes. Having her cake and eat it too, or a kind of one-way street, if you will, in terms of who's influencing who politically. That seems untenable from the standpoint of the broader political society, doesn't it? Or certainly from Republicans.
Yes, it has proved to be untenable. And with the heavy emphasis of the Trump administration and its questionable tactics, like hitting a mule with a 2x4 to make it move. And one wonders whether those tactics were necessary or not to have made the impression that I think has been made. And of course, the next president might be a Democrat, but the Republicans, I don't think, will abandon their attitude or their discovery, really, that the university's higher education is all against them. And I think they'll keep that issue alive beyond the time of the Trump administration. That's not going to go away. So I don't think that we can go back simply to the status quo ante Trump. And you see that especially in the matter of grade inflation. They took the logic of grade inflation is that everybody has self-esteem, and in a democracy, everybody deserves to have an equal self-esteem. an equal high opinion of himself. And the logic of that led to what actually happened, where everybody gets an A. So, and that suddenly it occurred to the Harvard faculty that this was inconvenient. They had a prize for a student who got the highest grade average. And it turned out that there were 55 people tied for that prize. And so it was interesting that they began to do something against grade inflation because they were worried about the people at the top rather than the bottom.
Mm.
And,
Could you say a little bit more about why that is?
Oh, they just ran out of A minuses, and they did not want to surrender a prize meant for the best to 55 people or to the whole student body. In other words, they did want to maintain the inequality at the highest rank. After all, how did they get into Harvard? This faculty, see, which is, let's say Harvard is the best or near the top of American colleges or universities. How did you get in? Well, as a student, it's a place very hard to get into, but once you're there, it's easy. but it can't be too easy. You shouldn't throw away the question of merit that got you entrance. Once you're there, you need to change your thinking and be ready for getting a grade that is not the same one that you got in high school. You're in the major league now. And it turns out that the smart people have degrees too, of smart and smarter and super smart. So, and some are disappointments as well. So it turns out that you can't just throw away merit in college after having made such a point of it to get there. And that's what Harvard and you can see that the fundamental difficulty of grade inflation is the same as affirmative action. Affirmative action, you also you're feeling sorry for the people who don't get in to the top universities at the same rate as others. So race or sex. And so you want to cancel that and give each person an A, so to speak. So really you can say that those two issues are pretty much the same. And what I was getting after in this book is liberal egalitarianism, which is the belief that everybody's equal, and if that doesn't turn out to be quite true, everybody has to be made equal, and with benefits or gifts, and told they're equal, though that's difficult. I wrote a paper a long time ago called The Underhandedness of Affirmative Action that I wish I'd put into this book, but it wasn't about Harvard. And the underhandedness of affirmative action is that you can never introduce a new professor and say, this is our new affirmative action professor. Thanks to this policy that we've been following, we've been able to find this Mr. or Miss whom I now present to you, because it's an insult. It's an insult to be told that you're that you needed a break. And you could say that's one of the big disadvantages of affirmative action, that it doesn't it doesn't account for that. You need to be told that you're what you really aren't. That it was, so to speak, a mistake that you were overlooked for equal treatment. And the proof of that is that you didn't get in. So you didn't get in, therefore you deserve to get in. And it's a way of teaching the rest of us that these inequalities actually do exist. If blacks always need a break, doesn't that mean that there's something wrong with them, something unequal? So you're sort of contradicting yourself while you're trying to overcome the contradiction in fact. And so it leads you to start really lying about what you're doing, and to call it a benefit when it's really a moonbeam, and it's nothing.
Well, I suppose
nothing to be proud of.
I suppose advocates for affirmative action would say that these inequalities, insofar as they exist, are the product of social circumstances, slavery, Jim Crow, discrimination, etc. And at least the original idea, I think, behind affirmative action was that this would be a temporary program. You discussed this in your book, and then mentioned that the argument does seem to shift at a certain point when we get to the notion of diversity, or diversity, equity, inclusion.
Right.
You know, the idea that diversity is our strength, that the institution should be sort of representative of a variety of identities, and that sort of thing. But you've been fighting affirmative action and grade inflation at Harvard, I think, for about 50 years. Is that right?
That is right. When it first began to appear, especially after the late 60s.
And then what seems to have moved the needle a bit on affirmative action, at least, is the Supreme Court. To use your metaphor, maybe hitting Harvard with a bit of a 2x4, although a legal one, one that operates within our constitutional system.
That's right.
How have the Harvard faculty or administration responded to that from your perspective? From the outside looking in, mm-hmm. They seem to have not been persuaded by the Supreme Court, but their initial response from the university seemed to be that, well, we're still totally committed to diversity, but we will follow the law, which kind of suggested that we will try to find ways to continue to promote diversity without, crossing the line into what would be illegal activity. But have you seen any evidence internally of recognition that maybe there is a problem with diversity, equity, and inclusion, especially from the standpoint of, say, the principles that should govern a university?
Well, I'm retired, so I'm not in the loop, and I don't get daily supervision. I actually living most of the time in Ipswich rather than Cambridge, though we still have a house there. So what I say is what I see and think or feel. I don't see much support now for affirmative action. One doesn't hear of it. And I know no politician promises to bring it back or to seek to bring it back. It always was unpopular because just from the standpoint of simple justice, two wrongs don't make a right. So from that standpoint, I think, it wasn't all that popular with black folks either. So I don't see any appetite among liberals or on the left to return to it, and I kind of think that the conservatives have won that battle. That doesn't mean that people won't try to return to it in situations where they can do it without taking responsibility for it. but affirmative action was a publicly announced and argued for and established policy, and I think in that way, it's probably gone. And though you're right that the feeling behind it is still there.
Earlier, when we were talking about trying to get more conservatives into the university, you mentioned or alluded to the fact that some people will say this is affirmative action for conservatives. Do you think hiring new faculty members, in part because they are conservative, does not fall prey to the same arguments against affirmative action that you've made over the course of your career?
Yes. It's not over race and it's not over sex. Those are two things that we want to hold above other considerations. That it's not a promotion because of those two things, and that assumes that blacks are going to get an equal opportunity, and so too are women. I could say something about the difference between those two groups, but I think that's different from opinion. Opinion is important. It's not something a reason can overlook. You can overlook the color of someone's skin or the anatomy of someone's body as to sex, and talk to that person and argue and reason. Then that person can write, and all that can be done with equanimity. But if you only have liberals or leftward liberals at your university, you are missing something. As I tried to argue before, missing one whole side of the argument, and also one whole half of the American electorate. Let's not say that universities have to follow the election returns, but they can't totally ignore them either. And the fact that Harvard, say, is a laughing stock in half the country, that's not good for us. And it's done almost totally gratuitously. It would be very easy to stop giving the impression that we think that the left is all there is. Just change the commencement and change the speakers that we have. But a whole range of things needs to be reformed. Academic honors are very important. Professors don't make a lot of money, but they do have a lot of prizes and awards, a few of which you mentioned. Yeah. In my case, and by the way, every single one of those came from a conservative source. I've never had any prize from the profession of political science or from Harvard University. I got a professorship, but everybody gets that. So I don't want to complain, but it's a fact that the universities could make a big difference by bringing in different people on public occasions. And Harvard started to do that in the most recent commencement in 2026. They had 5 honorary degrees, and 2 of them were conservatives. And a wonderful Englishman I know said, and Noel Malcolm, and Peggy Noonan. So 40%, you could say, of the honorary degrees at Harvard commencement this year went to conservatives. That's a little bit beyond tokenism. So I thought that's the kind of thing which all universities need to do and can do right away.
Yeah, that's not bad. The Buckley Institute at Yale came out with a report recently looking at their class day and speakers and honorary degree recipients, and found that virtually no Republicans in decades have received such honors from them. If I could shift gears just a bit, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions about Harvard and its students. You've said that Harvard is missing essentially half the conversation, especially now that you've retired. There's even fewer people there to represent it. Do you think
one fewer?
Yeah, one fewer. Well, and one of your colleagues, Jim Hankins, has left for Florida as well. So,
sure.
But does Harvard as an educational institution serve its students well? Would you send your own child to present day Harvard to get a degree?
Yes to the latter question, and no to the former question.
Okay. Well, explain that then.
The reason why it's good to send your kids to Harvard is the other students. This is the usual reason that's given for going to Harvard, is the other students are pretty good. They choose well. That is one thing they do. Obviously they need to pay more attention to the political orientation of the people who apply, but on the whole, there's pretty smart people there. So Harvard is not way above. There are half a dozen places where that's true, I think. So that's one thing. But they have been in the practice of wokeism and of treating differences, say, between the sexes as if they don't exist, and assuming that everybody is on the left and they all need to have a therapist ready in case a Republican should win a presidential election, that kind of thing. So I would say that of the different categories of people at Harvard, the students are the most available, most interested, and least woke. And the faculty is more woke, and the administration is more woke than that. And the most woke part of all of academia are the professional associations, which are totally in the hands of the left. So that's a view of the kind of hierarchy of leftward discrimination that exists and needs to be changed.
What about the issue of the core or general education? Some of my colleagues at ACTA run a project, whatwilltheylearn.com, and they evaluate over 1,000 colleges and universities in terms of do they require various courses, science, economics, foreign languages, etc. ACTA doesn't practice great inflation, you'll be delighted to hear. But that means that there's very few universities that earn an A. I believe it's around 19 that get an A or an A plus. Harvard, I'm sorry to say, receives an F. I think the only course that it gets credit for, I believe, is writing, required composition. And so I wonder what you think of that. I mean, I know Harvard has a sort of long history of arguing over these issues, going all the way back, well over 100 years to the introduction of, an elective system and all of that sort of thing. Do you think Harvard would be better off if it had a stricter core that offered students less choice?
Yes. Okay. And one of my chapters in this book discusses this and gives some of my views on what should be in that a general education core. But Harvard did have a program of general education. I think it invented the phrase. Started me with in 1947. I think it was that the president James Bryan Conant, who was a scientist. Was very much and was involved with the Manhattan Project to build the atomic bomb, was very much concerned with the relation between science and the non-science people. And so what he meant by general was general that includes both science and non-science. How do you deal with that? And that's why he wanted. So the general education program was rather good. See, it didn't make requirements for particular courses, but it offered choice within a requirement. So you had to take some kind of science course, and there was maybe a half a dozen choices. So it was a kind of combination of choosing and requiring. And it was also the case that when you majored in a field, say like political science, there were a number of courses that you had to take, and sometimes special courses within those choice. So it wasn't just a matter of choice and non-choice, but a mix. Aristotle would appreciate this, a mix of choice and selection or requirement. But over time, the Harvard requirements tended to lose their strength, and more came to be included among ways to resolve that or satisfy that requirement. And so general education sort of degenerated from courses that were general in the original sense to courses that were odd. If you were a professor and you had some hobby that you wanted to give a course on, you could get it listed as general education. And then they had a reform of it called core, which gave ground to choice, and but still tried to state categories that you had to represent in your thing. But again, the same thing happened. And if you look at the transcript of a Harvard graduate, the courses that he or she took, it's a scramble and a mess, and really a disgrace. So there are Harvard believes too much in choice, not only the right to choose an abortion, but the right to choose generally for everything. Yeah. And, so, it needs very much to have, I think, a course on, America or the American founding or American principles.
Mm-hmm. Well,
the course I once taught that had Tocqueville's Democracy in America and The Federalist. Anyway, to me, everyone should read those two books if you go to college. Learn about your country and learn about what is thought of the best thinking about your country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've just released a broadside to the nation here at ACTA in honor of America's 250th birthday, calling on every college and university in the country to require that every graduate take a course in, American history and government, and certain texts should be included in that course. I don't think Tocqueville's in there, but the Federalist Papers, or at least a selection of them, certainly are. I wonder, to move things towards a close and sort of back to the political situation that Harvard finds itself in today, do you think that Harvard faculty or the Harvard administration believe that they owe something to the nation? Do they understand themselves as living within the American regime? They, of course, are a private university, but on the other hand, they do receive a variety of benefits, from the American government. And they, of course, are situated in this country. They're older than it. I see that people from Harvard sometimes like to remind Americans of that fact. But do you think they have any sense of obligation to the American people in terms of how they run Harvard?
Pretty low on that, I would say.
Okay.
If I'd seen my colleagues, I would have a better view of it. But my impression is that they are stunned by what has happened. They were stunned by the downfall of Claudine Gay. That was the most obvious thing. And also by the Supreme Court decision on affirmative action. So both of which very much affect their thinking. They, I think, for the most part, don't think that they've done anything wrong or that anything that needs to be reformed. So they will favor anyone who is willing to fight Donald Trump on these matters. Mm. And there may they've, as I mentioned before, they've sort of forgotten about affirmative action or don't speak of it anymore. I mean, that they see is not going to work. But otherwise. They think that their obligation is to be the way they are, to be independent, and this is that's academic freedom, and there's really not much thinking about the limits to academic freedom or even the purpose of it, but the rights to study what you want as you want, and to keep a university that has that same belief and that thinks that everything can be put in terms of choice. I think that's and then there are no obligations that should go from university to the citizens.
But on the other hand, you've mentioned the new president, Alan Garber. He does seem to be implementing various reforms. I guess just to bring the conversation to a close, if you had to make a prediction, which is always a risky business, how do you think things will sort out for Harvard relative to its conflict with the Trump administration?
I'm not the kind of political scientist that predicts, but I would say they'll probably win most of their cases against the Trump administration, but they probably will lose a lot of the grants that they get from the government. Certainly, I don't think they'll continue at the same level. Huh. And and the tax on their endowment, which is not small, they will have a lot of trouble getting rid of that because the Democrats like taxes, and Harvard and other universities are certainly rich. So, if they thought about it, I think they wouldn't be as quite as complacent as I believe they are.
All right. Well, congratulations on the publication of your two most recent books. Again, The Rise and Fall of Rational Control and Where Harvard Went Wrong. Professor Mansfield, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Radio Free Campus. If you enjoyed the show, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss an episode. Audio-only versions of Radio Free Campus are available on all other podcast streaming platforms. Whether you have comments, questions, or suggestions for future episodes, the hosts would love to hear from you. Comment below or email them at radiofreecampus@goacta.org. Radio Free Campus is offered by the Campus Freedom Initiative at the American Council of Trustees and Alumni. For more information, please visit goacta.org. Only 19% of all Virginia students surveyed say their campus is very welcoming of people with unpopular political opinions. Discover more at goacta.org.